back, wave. All right, y'all good? My name is Kim Freudiman, and I helped to, with a variety of wonderful, amazing community members and practitioners, organize the event tonight. I just wanted to step up and thank a few people, and I'm going to thank the individual practitioners. They were on the list of sponsorship, but Christ and Holy Trinity Church, this was an amazing gift to the community to allow us to use this space tonight. Panera Bread, Garlic and Herbs, and the Pantry and Stu Leonard's, they all really donated all the stuff in the back and were quite generous. And so I wanted to welcome everybody and thank you for turning out. I would love this to be the first conversation in a series of conversations. At the very end, we're going to have some practitioners and professionals from the community who are going to help Lisa to be able to answer questions that you might have that might be more community specific. And they'll come up and they'll introduce themselves. Right now, I am going to introduce the Reverend Whitney Edwards, who is going to welcome you all to her space.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you on behalf of Christ and Holy Trinity for coming and blessing this space and being here. I'm sure many of you remember the Reverend Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, who, when he was a young boy, was upset deeply, as the story goes, by a tragedy. And his mother told him to always look on the sides for the helpers, because in any tragedy there are always helpers. And it is very, very much of a blessing to be in a room full of people longing to help and to heal. So we wish you blessing on this. I stand here as a representative of Christ and Holy Trinity, but also of all the clergy of the region. We are a tight group and we all share in our longing to be healing agents in this community. So please avail yourselves of us and invite your children to do so, because that's what we're here to do. So without further ado, remember that we are available, and bless you tonight, and blessings upon all who have helped make this night happen. Will Jen wish for the microphone?
Hello. I'm Jennifer Gruen, and I'm here with my partner, Nikki Gorman. We're pediatricians in town.
Up a little bit, like we can.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. I'm Jennifer Gruen. I'm one of the pediatricians in town. I'm here with my partner, Nikki Gorman. We're at Village Pediatrics, and we're here to represent the pediatric community and to remind everybody that we are all here for you and here for your children. And if you have any concerns or questions, or just remind your children if they have any concerns, they can call us directly. And I have the honor and pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker tonight, who is, excuse me, Lisa Athan, who is a grief specialist and a national speaker who travels giving presentations such as this and helping the community learn how to handle our grief in times like this and how to help create resilience in our children and ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank you all for having me here tonight. This is the first time I've ever been to this town, other than people are writing to me, my friends saying, Paul Newman, Martha Stewart. I'm like, all right, you're intimidating me more. But then a mom wrote to me today, and I wound up calling her. And then when I arrived here very early, because I wanted to beat the traffic on 95, she said, why don't you come to my house? And I said, really? You don't even know me. She said, I know, come on over, just for a little bit. What are you gonna do, sit in the parking lot? And I went over and I said, I love this town. And I want to tell you that because it's really important. One experience, one pediatrician. I love the pediatricians in this town. The clergy. I love that all of you are here. I thought that was me. I was going to say, it's going to be one of my kids. I'm going to yell at them and you're all going to say, she's going to talk to us about talking to our kids. I was preparing for this presentation and I have 4 children. I'm very blessed to have 4 children, 17, 19, 22, and 26. And 3 of them called me last night and I'm like, I'm preparing a talk. They're like, on what? I'm like, on how to talk to our kids. I really can't talk to you now. And my one daughter's like, Mom, do you see the irony? I'm like, oh yeah, I guess, right, okay. And the other one's calling to tell me she was at a party at college and undercover police. I'm like, okay, don't tell me this. I'm going to talk to parents. She said, right, like you have it all together? I'm like, right. Because that's part of the whole thing. We're here. Like you guys have had loss, really difficult loss, and I'm really, really sorry. And I don't know the people. And somebody was just saying, it's kind of nice to have somebody else come in. It is. It's really nice just because I'm not in here grieving right now over that. I have other things I'm grieving about. But what's also nice is that you have so many people here that want to help each other. Because I go to communities and people don't come out and aren't willing to get up and afterwards, and some of you are like, you know, I'm not getting up in front of all these people. I just want to, on a side note, I spent middle school, high school, and college getting out of public speaking. Anybody else hate public speaking? Like any time we had to do public speaking, I asked for an F, a 0, or a 20-page paper I volunteered to do. And it was agony for me, that so much that my high school guidance counselor in Maplewood, New Jersey, gave me a plaque because I'd say to the teacher, I can't do public speaking. They'd say, well, of course you, no, I'm beyond phobic. So I'd go to his office and say, get me a different class, a different teacher. And at the end of high school, he gave me a plaque for the most schedule changes for the last 3 years. Love Hal. And I loved Hal Young. And I never got to thank him for helping me avoid all my fears. But I promised him that someday when I was old and 40, I'd handle my fears. And he's not here, but I tell his kids who are my age now all the time. And that's important because my guidance counselor is one of the most important people in my life. And I won't go into too much detail because I'm being videotaped, but no. But I do want to share with you, I came from a family where it's interesting, one side were millionaires and the other side was very poor. And you know, as kids, you take notes in your head on lots of things that you see and pressures and things like that. But my grandmother, who was very poor, was the one we wanted to spend time with because she listened. And we could talk to her about anything. You know those people that you can just tell them anything? The pediatricians I talk to strike me like that. That you could just tell them anything and they're not going to say, what? Because I'm telling you, when we do that to our kids, forget it. The other thing, I'll tell you right off the bat, if you ask them a question like, how was school today? What'd you do today? You know, they look at you like, really? Is this all you got? Like, you know, kids tell me, one of my clients, I do Skype with people and I do sessions, and she said, Lise, please tell them, she's in California, what my son told me the other day. I said, I will tell them. He's 14. And he said, she said, we've been doing a lot better, our relationship. I think it's some of the skills Lisa's been working with me on. And he said, well, actually, I think it's because now that he's 15, have a driving permit, and you don't talk to me anymore in the morning to school because you don't want to distract me, we have a much better relationship. So she said, so basically if I don't talk to you, yeah, it's so much better. Like, don't you notice we get along? So that's part of the problem. I'm going to start off the bat with the teens. And so anyway, I grew up in this family. We had alcoholism in the family and addiction and a lot of money. And we were all sexually abused as kids by a relative. And I didn't tell anybody. And I'm sharing that with you because I was 10 years old and told no one till I was 22 years old. And I went to school and I laughed and joked and was a good student. And I was on teams and nobody knew. And there were times in 8th grade that I wanted to kill myself. And I felt so much shame, thinking if people knew now with Penn State and Tyler Perry and, now things are in the news, but it wasn't like that. Suicide, homicide, AIDS, there's so many things that people have shame about. I go all over the country and talk to parents and say, my kids are struggling with addiction. Or they got locked up, and we have shame. Like, it's so hard to be a parent. Isn't it the hardest thing? Remember when our grandparents and parents said to us, little children, little problems? And we'd say, yeah, okay, I can't wait for them. And then they got older, and they did things that were like, I can't even tell people. One of the great therapists I was listening to one day, she said, I did this great talk. I went out to my car, and I said, so good at what I do. And she said, then the superintendent called to say they expelled my daughter from the high school. And she said, but for that moment, I felt like, wow, I'm so good. And don't you feel like that? You go to work and you're like, the kids like me at work. And your kids are like, yeah, they don't know the real you. That's right. But anyway, so all those things go on for our kids. So I'm always aware. So I brought my kids up, my father screaming about report cards and how things look, and he'd always, because he had 2 alcoholic parents, so he wanted everything to look really good. I don't blame him. He grew up always being embarrassed. So he wanted us to look really good, but we weren't feeling good. But we wanted to look good, and we wanted to please him. So I go around the country and collect index cards from kids all over. Wealthy towns, poor towns. I was in Kentucky where the kids don't have food and they backpack on the weekends. I'm like, really? Where do they go? On mountains? And the teacher's like, no, they put food in the kids' backpacks. Not that we don't do that in every other state as well. And I said, oh, I didn't know that. And the kids will share with me. I'll say to them, I share a little bit about my story, that I came from all this, but you know what? And I thought about suicide and things like that. And luckily, I got into some counseling. I found teachers always in every school. How many of you are teachers or were teachers? I mean, teachers save lives all the time. And some of the kids that you think they don't like you, that keep coming back and then they visit you and you're like, why are you coming to visit me? I thought you didn't like me. You mean the world to them. How many of you had a teacher growing up? A teacher or somebody in the school, a nurse? Anybody in here, school nurses, the nurses? How many of you had an adult in school, in one of your schools, that was so important to you? Raise your hand. Really important. How many of you never told that person how important they are? If you can find them on Facebook, if they're alive. I just met with my 6th grade teacher, had lunch with him, and he said, I want to meet with you because my wife's dad's sick. I'm like, oh, now that I'm not in 6th grade, I know something, I can help you. But anyway, I wanted to tell him how important he was. So we go through life, I say, with a box of dominoes. So teachers are important, the pediatricians are important, the clergy is important. I'm going to get to the dominoes. I ask kids all the time, especially younger kids, but even my adult kids, trace your hand. Tell me 5 safe adults in your life that you can go to, because when you have a tragedy like this, I tell my kids all the time, I don't ever, my daughter was in college, I'll never forget, my oldest never cries. And I got a call one afternoon, and luckily I was home from a presentation. I heard her cry, so I knew the world came to an end. She said, remember Brian? I'm like, Brian? Of course, I'm a helicopter parent for my first child, so I was down at the college like every weekend with brownies and hanging out with everybody, all the things you're not supposed to do. Because, you know, if we're too involved, we're helicopter parents. If we're not involved, we're neglectful parents. Basically, whatever we do, we got it wrong. So just accept that now. It makes it much easier. So she said, remember Brian? I'm like, yeah, Brian. He's a B student. I just remember that because we'd always say, you know, those kids that are too much with the perfectionism, that's not good either. He had friends, he was a youth group volunteer, he did everything. She said he just took his life. I couldn't believe it. This was a kid that, not that some kids, but some people are struggling for a long time, but this kid, and I said, do you want me to come down? She said, yeah. I drove down to the school, and I'll never forget, ever in my life, seeing 20-year-old kids sobbing, boys sobbing, holding each other sobbing. And one of the school people said, you should all go inside the building. And they said, no, we're just here outside. And I just, wow. We went to the funeral and I hung out and I told some of her friends' parents, come down. They act like they don't want you. They need you there. Not sitting next to them. They need you in the room. And you know what they need? They need to see that you're broken up too. And they need to know we don't know what to say, but we care. And I want you, when you see people who've had tragedy in their life, I want you to say, in the grocery store, do not turn your cart around. And I'm speaking from people who tell me all the time, I hate that. The grocery store for a bereaved parent is the hardest place to go for a number of reasons. Just seeing the food of your, anyone, a loved one, and you're thinking, that's her favorite. Elizabeth Edwards wrote in Saving Graces, she was in the soda aisle and saw her son's favorite food and collapsed in an aisle. She said no one bought soda for 10 minutes that day. So it's really important to say to people, I don't know what to say. Say to your kids, They're going to say, how many of you, your kids asked where you were going tonight? How many of you, when you get home, they're going to say, where were you? What'd you talk about? And you'll be like, I don't know, this woman, we don't know what she did. But anyway, we don't know what to say. So we want to be humble. We want to say to our kids, I'm hurting too, and I don't know why. You know, that why question whenever I go to communities, when someone takes their life, just like with Brian, we're going to make up all sorts of things. You know why? Because we want to know why. Partly we want to know why, because then if we think we know why, we think it can't happen to our kids and to other people. But you know, we never get to know why. And I'm a grief counselor and sit with people for so long, for years, and family members who say, I still struggle. There's a couple, I can't remember their last name, a brother and sister that go around the country and speak about suicide. And it's been 40 years since the brother took his life. And they said every 10 years we come up with a different reason, we think. You know, we thought he had bipolar, then we thought it was sexual this, and we thought this, and we thought, we don't know. And I always tell kids when I speak in high schools, it's so easy to get angry and want to blame because we're angry that this happened, we're scared. And it's easier, let's face it, it's easier to talk about anger and be angry than it is to be sad and vulnerable and scared. It's much easier, we feel more empowered. So instead of, I tell communities all the time, instead of going down that path, let's come to, like you guys, all come out together and say, what do we say to our kids? You know, one thing teenagers say a lot is parents are always asking us, how do we feel? First of all, asking kids how they feel, you know, they look at you like, what do you mean, how do I feel? You know, and you're thinking, how is that such a difficult question? It is for a lot of them. They don't really know. Some therapists I know said, I give them paper clips and I give them like mad, sad, and I'll say, put some paper clip piles in, oh, can I feel two feelings? Can I feel this? Can I feel that? And then model though. Tell them how you feel. You know, teenagers tell me all the time, I'll say to them, how many of you know that one of your parents lost a parent when they were in high school or middle school? And some of the kids raised their hand. Did you ever ask them what that was like for them? No. And then I say to them, go home and ask them. Then a week later, I have the kids write me letters and they'll say, oh my gosh, I had no idea that my dad was told to be the man of the house now that his father died. And I had no idea my mom had to babysit. So have those conversations. Again, when you leave tonight and with everything that's going on right now, it's not like you have to sit down for 10 hours. You think your kids want to talk to you for 10 hours? I mean, how long do they give us? Like a minute in between, we're catching them out the, whatever. I have a friend, she's a grandma, she said, this is what I do. I send them letters at college and I say, I'm enclosing this $50 bill and I don't put the money in. And then I get texts and Grandma, I got you. I got the letter, yeah? The money wasn't there. Yes, I didn't send. I want to see if your phone worked. That's awesome. I'm like, I love that. I want to tell you, I was speaking at an assisted living, and a woman said she's 92, that all her grandchildren and great-grandchildren call her. And I said, you're very wealthy? Nope. I said, okay, so tell me, I want the secret. She said, I keep an old-fashioned phone book. Remember what that is? I'm like, yeah, with A to Z. She said, I'm 92, I can't remember. And I write down their names, Matt. So when Matt calls from Ireland, I look up his girlfriend, last I knew was Laura, just took the MCATs, and I ask him. And he'll say, Grandma, you remember everything. She's like, I don't remember anything, but I remember. She said, one day I won't know his name because with M, and I won't be able to do that, but for now. And I say sometimes, and I know this sounds terrible, like cyber, the pedophiles, we're always worried about our kids, you know, meeting these people. And I always say to parents, why are they meeting these people? Because the people are showing an interest. And we're so busy. How many of you have tons of free time? You know, you're like, what is free time? What are our kids don't have free time? You know, I'm like, I wish we could all stop one day and just say, okay, this is nuts. We're medicating our kids so they can live like crazy lives. And I say to kids all the time, when do you get to, I'm not against medication, I'm just saying we over-medicate because we want our kids to sit still when they're like 4 years old. We're going to be testing them soon for like crawling. I'm sorry, not getting into Harvard. You know, sometimes I do talks and I'm going to call it Get Your Kid into Princeton, but they're 5. I know, but you know, you're already, and kids will say, I wish we could spend a Saturday, even an hour not talking about college. school, grades. So I'll tell them, and you won't like this, but I tell kids to go home and say, you know, to your parents, is that you guys get the paper. Are you done with your work, Dad? Did you finish it all? Because I don't really know if you can watch the football game right now. I also tell them when the parents say, you know, why can't you be more like your sister? I just said to a town, Westfield, New Jersey, I said, why don't you go home and say, you know, you're always comparing me to my sister. I wish you were more like Kathy's mom. She's so cool, she dresses so cool. And I'm like, and then run, because you know you're not getting dinner that night. Anyway, back to what we say. So we have a box of dominoes. These are all the things in our life that are important to us. If your kids were here right now, and I would say, you know, what's important in their life right now? What are some of the things important in their lives? Friends, really important. Yeah, I just want you to know, whenever I speak to high school students, all over, when I ask this question, I always say to them, what do you think parents think you say first? They say friends. And I'm like, and every time, what do you say first? They're like, parents, but don't tell them. I'm like, I know, you don't want them to know how, you're always first. I've had football teams, like 7-foot guys, like, yeah, Mom. I'm like, and the one kid goes, really? That's what I was gonna say. I'm like, okay. But friends are really important. You know, friends are really, really important. How many of you have friends for lifelong friends? Right? My best friend, she didn't like me in 8th grade. She said I joked around too much. I wonder why. Anyway, but we became best friends in 10th grade, and our kids are the same ages and things like that. Friends really important. And when friend loss, when you lose a friend because a friend died, or you lose a friend because your friend stopped talking to you, or they ditch you, or, you know, they make new friends. I always tell kids, I wish there was a nice way to say, you know, we used to hang out, but we're different now, we have different interests. I still like you, but I'm hanging out with these people. Like a nice breakup sort of thing. That would be really nice and respectful. So friends, what else is important in their lives? Social media. It's important in my life. If you ask my 17-year-old, she'd say it's more important to me than it is to her. She's always like, Mom, leave the phone at the door. I'm like, okay, I'm one of these. So social media is really important. It's a way they connect, and a way they bully each other, and the way they hurt each other, and it makes us crazy. And as I always say, it's not going away anytime soon. So those things that make us crazy, instead of complaining about them, we have to learn to say, okay, how are we going to handle it? And it's a huge thing. I know the Instagram, what I do, because I talk to teens, is I get on all of it. Snapchat, I'm on all of it. My college kids like, Mom, don't look at my last Snapchat. I'm like, oh, like I have time to, but I want to know what they're doing. One of the things that I decided when I had kids, because my father didn't do this with us, I wanted to know what was really important to my kids, not what I thought was important for them. You know, how many of you were raised where people had ideas for you of how you should be? Right? And we sometimes do that to our kids, but you have so much potential, but you're so good at it. How many of you are really good at something, but you don't really love doing it? And some of you are like, yeah, my job right now, I'm really good at it. Because there's times where we're like, I'm not loving it anymore, and our kids too. So I want you to go home and get to know your kids a little bit. And I say that because I sit with moms all the time who've lost children. And I'm working with a family now, lost a 6-year-old, who said, the one mom who works and yet went to all of her child's things. I think she didn't miss anything but one thing. And she's like, I wish I had been there more. I wish I had. So I always say, go home and find out what do you love so much about, you know, that music. What's your favorite show? Remember the Newlywed Game years ago? I know I'm older than a lot of you. I'm 50. Oh yeah, I just turned 55. But they, you know, where you have to know things about the other person. How many of you know some of those things about your kids? And what do they know about you? You know, I always ask kids, who are your favorite teachers? And don't tell me their name. What do you like them about? Why do you like that teacher so much? What do you think the #1 reason why most people like someone? Because they like us. Maya Angelou's quote, which is my favorite. People don't remember what you said. They don't remember what you did. But they always remember the way you made them feel. And I tell kids that. In high schools too, and friends. You don't have to love everybody, but be kind, be respectful, and don't talk about people. And I'm starting with you guys. The next time you're in the store and someone says, hey, I heard, I tell my kids all the time, we have enough stories. I realized I was gay 3 years ago. at 52 years old, had to get divorced from the best husband in the entire world. Like how I didn't know this, I think from my sexual abuse, perhaps, I don't know. And I had to disappoint my kids, and I thought of killing myself one afternoon. Didn't have a plan, but I actually thought I'm going to humiliate my kids. I'm going to ruin my husband's life. Like, it was devastating. And I called somebody and said, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't even tell people. It's not like when my mom died, when my dad died, I could tell people, hey, this happened. You know those losses? When things happen, my first husband had an affair. I wonder why now. Anyway, and those are those losses. You can't say, hey, guess what's going on? I remember picking up the kids at school that day, smiling. And inside, and we've had things like that, where your head's exploding and you don't know how to tell people. And you feel really alone. And yet I got through it. I came home, made some calls, told my kids, and said, I don't know, I'm going to reach out. I always reach out. I have on my website thousands of resources. I'm always connecting. I found the Pride Center in New Jersey, went to groups I didn't know. I finally realized there was and did the most respectful divorce, and we're still best friends. He comes every morning with bagels for my daughter. He's the best stepdad in the world. He's awesome. He's just not a girl. That's the only thing. But other than that, he's awesome. But now I really know. For years, I've talked to kids about coming out and the whole sexual orientation thing, and trans kids and the pediatricians, though, because one of our pediatricians would say to me, I ask the kids when the mom's not in the room or the dad, and I'll say, do you like anybody? Not do you like a boy, do you like anybody? And she's like, they all tell me, I actually like a girl. And she said, and then I'm not judgmental. Love that. So I'm just saying, that's a whole nother thing. So every experience I have in my life, I chalk it up to, I made it through that. I made it through 8th grade, so I knew after 8th grade I could make it through anything. So even 3 years ago, when my life was falling apart, I thought, I made it through 8th grade. Worst year of my life. I can make it through this. And not only will I make it through, I'll learn to laugh. And I did. Went to my first questioning group and didn't know which sweatshirt to wear. And I thought the fact that I owned 30 sweatshirts should have told me. But anyway, so family, friends, health is important. Their stuff, you know, their dreams, their hopes, their abilities. How about kids with ACL? How many of you have athlete kids? Right? And they get injured, they get a concussion, and you're like plotting with them to fail to pass that concussion test because you're like, okay, you can't miss it. I mean, I had a daughter playing basketball, right? And they're saying, could you just write a note that the concussion's not that bad? So, you know, and it's like crazy. And I believe that. I know what that's like. I have learned not to judge. I really have. Because we have no idea what someone else is going through. And so when I have my kids read index cards from kids, and I'm writing a book with the index cards, and I say, if you only knew is the name of the book. You don't know what this kid's dealing with. Your kids don't come home and say, I was bullied again today. A kid threw my lunch away. The girls called me a slut again. This one happened. They don't tell us that. You know, they're at the age they're trying to separate from us. They're trying to do their own thing, and they're trying to be independent. And they grieve. They don't want to necessarily cry to you. They want to be with their friends. After a student dies, kids want a teacher dies, kids want to come together, and I don't know if you saw that with some of your kids, they just want to sleep over in the basement and all be together and stay together and talk and stay up, and they need a parent in the house to make sure they're not drinking or drinking too much or whatever you allow, because, you know, when you're grieving, I always tell kids, do not go to a funeral under the influence. It's so disrespectful, and you won't remember it, and you're going to want to remember all of it. And my daughter, when Brian died, I'll never forget the end of the wake, she said to his mom, everyone was leaving. She said, you know, I can't take that his hair's all neat and his shirt. She's like, can I make him look? And the mother said, please make him look like he really looks. So she mussed up his hair and pulled his shirt out a little, and the mom and my daughter cried. And I left it outside just so they could be together. Because that's how it happens, grief. Little pieces, spurts, they'll say one thing, and you know, they'll open up a little to you, and don't you want to like run with it? And go, oh my gosh, you're talking, can I just ask you? And then they're like, see ya. And you're like, it's so difficult. They give you like a little, it's like one of those coconut treats in the back. Not that I ate like 3 of them, but anyway, you eat one. But our kids give you a little window into what's going on, and the best thing is to say nothing sometimes. Yeah, I miss him too, or it's really hard. I don't know why either. These are the hardest things we have to deal with in life. But like the Reverend said about Mr. Rogers, and I love him, love his quotes. Every day on Facebook I put 3 inspirational quotes, and I often go to Fred Rogers. And one of his quotes is, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. And those things growing up I couldn't mention, I barely managed. So I know things like this, the fact that you all came out, shows that you want to know how to talk about it. So we have family, friends, there's stuff, and sometimes suddenly not. Everything just comes falling down, everything. And in that moment, when you can't even believe, you know, you hear the news and you're like, no way. How many of you in your life have felt like, no, I already suffered, we've suffered enough. No way, not that person, not that family, not this community. It's so unfair. When people get angry, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who did Stages of Dying, said she would have included anger at God, because so many people said to her, it's so not fair. How could this happen? How do we talk to our kids about this? And there's ways, and now there's books, and you know, I tell kids all the time, sometimes people have heart attacks, and when their heart doesn't work right, they don't breathe as well, they're not getting oxygen, you know, they get cranky, like people with chronic coped, like my father had at the end, they're cranky. I like to prepare kids a lot, because I had no preparation growing up in my crazy home. I'm always saying, we're gonna go to the hospital when my mother was sick, we're going to see her, and before we go, let me tell you what it's going to be like. I always call schools at funerals, and I'll say, let the kids know if it's open casket, prepare them. Because goodness knows there's enough things in our life that we have no prep time for. And when this stuff happens that we don't have prep time, take some time to breathe a little yourselves. Because so many of you are running around without putting the oxygen mask on yourself right now. And you're running on empty. You're tired, you're cranky, you haven't slept. You're at the pediatrician's office like, yeah, forget my kid. I'm the one who needs. And you need to talk, right? You need to sit and just say, get a cup of coffee with somebody. And say, I need to talk. I am so ill-equipped to deal with this. Guess what? We all are. Where's that manual? Didn't we get promised a manual when we brought that kid home? You know, and that we figure out how to do it? No. So I say to kids, sometimes organs, our brain doesn't work. I was at a school and a little boy said, my dad died because his brain wasn't working right. We have books like that sometimes describe, sometimes the brain, you know, is not making the right chemicals and people aren't thinking. They're not in their right minds when they do certain things. Because I sit with families who say, he loved us. Of course he loved you, and of course you loved him. And yet when someone dies of cancer, we never say, you think we loved him enough? We can't love people out of cancer and heart attacks and things, but we do that with the death of suicide, as if the people aren't suffering enough and wondering and questioning. So be very mindful when you meet people, and not just these couple in the community. Lots of people here have been touched by suicide. Millions of people every year are touched by a friend, a family member years ago, and it brings all that up. And that's another thing I want to say. When teens grieve, you know, sometimes you'll say, but you didn't even know that kid. Well, I knew, but you don't even know. Sometimes we don't know the relationship people had. I've sat with kids who, you know, felt guilty because they weren't nice to somebody. I've sat with kids who say, I wish I had been friends. We drifted away because now we were in high school, and I feel badly about that. Kids will say to me, I wish I had spent more time with my grandmother. I'm like, how much free time do you have? Oh, none? It's hard. And I'll say to kids, make sure when you leave today, you know, make a list of people that you haven't seen or talked to. And let them know. Let people know you care about them. I tell teenagers all the time, what do you think people wish we had said to someone before they die? I hear people say, I wish I had said I love you, if you feel like that. Not everyone's a loved one. There's less than loved ones out there. Sometimes we want to say thank you. I'm sorry. I forgive you. I'll miss you. I appreciate you. I had a dad recently just lost his daughter in a car accident in 5 minutes. She changed out of her soccer jersey, and they hit black ice and she died, and he cried and said to me, I tell my coworkers and I'm a manager, and I tell my employees how much I appreciate them. I never told her. I was always asking her about her grades. And she was a good student. I wish I had had so many more conversations with her. And so the work I do, it reminds me all the time. I grab my kids sometimes and I say, we're going to the beach. They're like, Mom, we have class. I'm like, okay, you can always go to class. You can always go to the beach all day. Let's seize the day. And I do that to them. My kids are like, oh my God, my mom. But really, and I go home and I look at them in the eye sometimes. And I'm like, I love you. Like for you, for who you are. When my daughter called and said, Mom, they were undercover calling the other day. My first thought is, I don't want her to think it's the end of the world. I said, you think you're the only kid at a college and there were undercover cops? We'll get through it. I hope you learn something from it and we talk about it, but it's not the end of the world. And I tell kids all the time, how many of you know the name Monica Lewinsky? And we all laugh and things. How many of you have seen her TED Talk? How many of you would say it's amazing? I think everyone should see the TED Talk on humiliation. She talks about Tyler Clementi, who I've since met his mom, who's awesome and does amazing work with bullying and suicide. And she'll say all the time, I wish I'd had more conversations with my son. I didn't take the conversation a little further, but Monica Lewinsky said her mother wouldn't let her shower with the door shut for a long time after. She was 22. When I saw her TED Talk the other day, I felt ashamed that I never once thought what it was like for her, a 22-year-old kid who had a crush on her boss. We just made jokes and laughed and never once thought what it must have been like for her until I watched that. You should all go home and watch that. I've had all my kids watch it because I want my kids to know no matter what happens in their life, no matter, we're going to get through it. And they'll say, how? I don't know, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to ask people. There's experts all around us in different areas. We're going to reach out. We're going to realize that our kid's not the only one struggling. Because part of this whole parenting thing that makes it so hard is we think we have to have it all together. You know, we look at everybody else. When my kids say, Mom, I heard this family, I'm like, don't even tell me. Trust me, they could do a movie on our family. Like, I don't want to hear, everybody's got stuff. But you know what, you come through it and you get some strength. Kids will say to me, I'll say, now that you've gone through your dad's suicide or what do you know about yourself? And they'll say, I can't even believe that I'm still here. And I feel a lot older than the other kids. Yeah, because you are like 40 now, right? You ever see kids who've been through a lot and they're so much more mature? A lot of them are a lot more compassionate. So what do we say to someone? What do we say to our kids? What do we say to someone after their dominoes have all spilled out? I ask kids all the time. I start with, what do you not want to hear? And the kids are great with, you know, just like I say, go home and ask each other, honey, if there was one thing I stopped doing tomorrow and never did again that would make your life better, and your kid will be like, just one thing, because there's like 8,000 that come to mind. Like starting with talking to me and looking at me and asking me questions. Okay. But say to them, if there was one thing I stopped doing, and if there was one thing I did do, I'm not saying I could do it, what would that be? And I say the same thing to the parents, go tell your teen. Really, just one thing. If you would just, you know, when I ask you to do something, do it within the 24-hour period. It doesn't have to be this second, because I don't like when people say, get up and do it now. We're all like engaged, but you know, and then be accountable. So I say to kids, what do you hate when people say when you're going through a hard time? A breakup? And a breakup, you know, is always hard. I don't know, death is really hard. And a breakup is really hard too. Because when you feel like someone doesn't want to be with you anymore, I don't know, that hits us on every part of our beingness. It really does. And we're raw and we're feeling rejected. You know, every rejection in your life comes up. Of everything. And when people just say things like, don't say to your teenager, I never liked that kid anyway, they're probably going to get back together like one of my kids have done 11 times. I'm like, I'm not saying anything. He's going to be my son-in-law, I have a feeling. I will not say anything. But that's not what they want to hear. I remember going through a divorce and someone saying to me, should I say congratulations or I'm sorry? And I said, I love that you ask and that you don't assume. And it's a little of both, you know, but don't assume. So kids say, I hate when you say, I knew exactly how you what? Feel. How many of you hate when people say that to you? Because I hate it. Because nobody knows exactly how we feel. I lost my mom and dad. Some of you lost both parents, and that was a weird feeling after my father died and thinking like, I have no parents. There's no buffer between, there's no one that's going to be as excited about something my kids do or I do than my dad. It's like, wow. So saying I know exactly how you feel, people don't like that. Yet, when I go to groups when parents have lost a child, at Compassionate Friends, which is an amazing support group, and I do a talk on grief, and I always say, I have not lost a child, and I have no idea. And parents will say, and I hate when people say, bereaved parents will say, I hate when people say, I can't imagine what that's like for you. And they'll say, no, you can't, and I don't want you to. And they say, imagine when you think about it, it's 1,000,000 times worse. Because every day you wake up, it's happening all over again. Or they hate when people say, I would never be able to do the things you're doing if I lost a child. And they say, you know what that sounds like? That we don't love our kid that much, that we're able to do, and they don't even know what we're able to do because they don't see us in our house, collapsed and crying. And I also don't like when people say you're so strong. I don't like when people say, I like if people want to say, I've become strong. But I don't want to say to someone, you're so strong, you're doing so well. What does that sound like? I don't want them to do. I want to hear my clients sometimes say, I just lost it. Good. I worry about the people that never lose it. I want you to lose it. Let's talk about some healthy ways to lose it. We'll do that in 1 minute. So I'd rather you say to people, I don't know what to say. I have no idea. My mother used to say, write in cards. I have no idea what to say. There are no words. One of the greatest books I read called There Are No Words, one of the 1,000,000 books that I actually didn't bring, by a dad who lost both his kids and talked about when the police came and they just blurted out, your kids died, and he walked around like with 1,000-pound weight on his feet, and he just felt like he couldn't move. And you know, I like when people say, I'm here for you if you are there for them. It's really important. I'm torn about saying, how are you? How you feeling? If you know somebody's feeling really badly, like, how many times do you say to people, hi, how are you? And you have no intention of really listening. Don't say that to people. I'm really about like the 4 agreements, be impeccable with your word. If you mean it, ask someone. And then if they're bereaved and they've had a tragic loss, be prepared. They may say to you, how the hell do you think I feel? Like the CEO, who's the Facebook, who's the widow, right? What's her name? Sandberg, that beautiful letter she wrote. Like, you can say, how's it going right now? But how's it going? It's like, wow. And people really do understand that you don't know what to say. And most people will say, I know. Somebody else said, somebody wrote a book called Don't Ask for the Dead Man's Golf Clubs. And it's a book because she said, at my husband's funeral, somebody said, he won't be playing golf anymore. I'm just thinking, could I use this? It's like Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David, asking for the Dodger tickets. Yeah, but your father goes, I want to imagine my dad sitting at, right, but he's not, so can I sit in the seat? Like, don't do that. Say to people, I don't know what to say I'm here for you. Show up with milk. Oh, people are lactose intolerant. Show up with something else. And show up and say, can I take your child who's on the spectrum to the movie so you can cry and not have her be all upset because you're crying again? Can I do something? Have a point person say this. I'm going to tell people what they can do. Actually do things. One woman who wrote a book, Kate Braystrup, called Here If You Need Me. After anybody read that book? Great book. 4 kids, her husband was a state trooper. He was killed in a car crash. She went to identify him. She came back and she said, I just heard her speak. She said, I literally didn't know what to do, like physically. Do I stand? Do I sit? Is this real? Like I'm in shock? Did I just identify? And she said, and the doorbell rings and there's a neighbor with steaming hot brownies. And she said, I'm thinking, she couldn't have like, no one knows my husband died. She couldn't have, I don't even know. And she just cried and handed her the chocolate brownies. And she said that was the kindest thing anyone ever did. I've had people say, neighbors came with a butterfly bush and just planted it in the backyard. No words. Said, it's okay, it's okay. And don't do the tuna casseroles. People, that movie 6 Weeks with Sally Field, and the brothers are taking the tuna casserole, just throwing them in the garbage, the whole refrigerator is filled. Now we have meal trains and things like that, which is good, so you're not. And food is really good to bring, because then the other people are eating and they don't say as many of the bad things to say. That's what I find. Food is good around grief. People, can't say those things. And then when you get it wrong, like when we do with our kids, you're going to say, I got it wrong. I really messed up. When I didn't tell you and you heard that thing, because here's the thing. You know how years ago, if we didn't want to tell our kids certain things, we had that choice? Remember years ago when we told our kids someone died, and now they tell us someone died, and they know everything what happened, and we're like, I wonder if I should tell them, and they already know. They know all of it. And it's so shocking. So it's so hard. We don't even know how to react sometimes. So sometimes you just say, you know what? I want to think about that a minute. And I want to get back to you. Remember, you're modeling for your kids. Say, I don't know. I'm sorry. I really messed up. I lost my temper. I'm cranky. How many of you feel more cranky lately? And just wiped out. Grief makes you tired. I have kids this is a different ball, but I have kids I do a grief camp, and I'll say, write down, shock. Write down feelings you feel after a loss. Anger. We talk about what do you do with the anger? In the beginning you feel shock and you're numb, and that's when people are saying, how do you feel? And you're like, I don't even think I feel. In the beginning, right, it hasn't even hit you yet. Well, I see a lot of grieving families, and sometimes in the beginning, they'll say, it wasn't so bad, now it's really bad. Yeah, now, 6 months later. Kids lose a parent, and sometimes 2 years later is when it really hits, or when they start high school, or get their license, or the next developmental milestone. Us too, right? You have a child, or you go through something, and then that person's not there. You have the holidays. So I make scream boxes with kids, and kids love this. Take a pasta box or something, rip up newspaper, paper towel, and kids love to rip things up. It's very therapeutic. I had a little girl one day ripping one little piece of a phone book, which I'm sure someday there won't be phone books. But anyway, kids will be like, what's a phone book? And just ripping it up, and her brother was shredding it and throwing it all over. Their mom had just died suddenly. And then you take a paper towel tube, and when you've had one of those days, I don't know if you have those days in Connecticut, New Jersey, just driving on our highways. Maybe if you drive at 95 during rush hour in Connecticut, you go like this. You've had one of these days, nothing's going right at work. You're like, oh my gosh, why can't we all just get in a boat and leave? And the stress, woo! And you scream. And the kids say, a bad day? It's like, no, I just got to get it out. And then I want you to model to your kids who your people are in your hand. Some of you, your 5 important people that you go to when you're upset, some of you have your child on your hand. I want you to take your kids off your hand. Not that it's not important to share things with them, but I don't want them to be your go-to when you're complaining about your ex-husband. They don't want to hear it. I say to kids all the time, have any of you ever heard someone say, you're just like your dad, with a smile? Like, you're just like, maybe some people, but kids don't want to be in the middle of it either. So that's really important. What else do you do when you're angry? So when kids say, I feel really angry and I don't even know why, I'm just frustrated, what do you do with that? I want you to talk about coping skills, because our kids wind up doing, what do they wind up doing? I say to them, I say to the kids all the time, what do adults do to cope with stress? And they're like, they drink a lot. I'm like, right, we don't want you to drink our drinks. Let's face it, like Bill Cosby, the good Bill Cosby years ago used to say that, like, don't drink my drink. So we drink. What else do we do? They're like, you take a lot of pills. I don't know. Mom's got stuff in her pocketbook. She thinks I don't take a lot of pills. I'm like, all right, what else? You live through us. This is wise guy high school kids. What do you mean we live through you? Oh, come on. Like, we're like your life, and oh, if we let you down, like some of the kids will say, I want my parents to get a life, so I'm not their main focus point. So it's important when you're sad. How many of you have cried in front of your kids at times? Raise your hand. It's awesome. How many of you remember the first time seeing one of your parents crying and thinking the world came to an end? Anybody? I remember seeing my father, I'm like, I think the world blew up. Like, what? And there's some people, and I want to talk about grief a minute. There's 3 types of ways people grieve. There's more, but they say intuitive grievers. Those are grievers that cry easily. They talk about their loss. You know, they like support groups because they hear other people talking. They talk, they're crying. We expect people to be intuitive grievers early on after a loss. And if they're not, we suspect them. You know, you're on the news, you're like, oh, they're not crying. But not everybody cries. Not everybody wants to talk about it. Then we have cognitive grievers. Those are the people, and some of our kids are, they think about it just as much, but they're not talking about it. They're in pain too. We used to say it's more masculine grief. Not that I don't like to generalize, but generally we'll see more men like that. And I'll say to dads, oh, where do you grieve? When do you get to let it out? At the cemetery, they'll tell me, in the car, and sometimes in the shower. The car, I mean, let's face it, the car is like the grief mobile for most of us. It's pouring, we're crying, and I always say, I wish the car had a breathalyzer for like emotions and be like, you are too angry to drive this vehicle. You're too sad, you must pull over again. But you know, what else do you do when you're sad? Those of you, so cognitive grievers who don't let it out, they should rent a sad movie once a month and just let it out. Some of you are like, you know, you put the songs on. When I ask kids, what's your go-to? Music for anger, for sad, for inspiration. They got a whole playlist for all. Ask them. And then say, what do you love about this song? I ask kids all the time, give me your best titles. And then when I go in, I play all these songs to them, and they're like, I love that. I'm like, I love what you share with me. It's great. Some of the songs, not so much. And then there's instrumental grievers. Those are the people that want to put together, like, I want to get somebody to come speak. I want to do a scholarship. I want to do a 5K. I hear your town is really big into that. I love that. Because you get together and you're like, you know what, there's a cause, we're all getting involved. That's great, because you're teaching your kids when there's an issue, we all come together, like tonight, and we say, you know, what can we do? And what are things that can we do that will be really helpful? And I want to just mention this on a side note with suicide and memorializations. Now things are different. I always tell kids, like, kids will say to me, but we want to all do this for, and I say, I know. When I was young, my parents smoked, and nobody knew smoking was bad. Well, when they were young, nobody knew smoking was bad. When I was young, we were told all the time, right? Remember? I'd go home every day and say, Mom, don't smoke, you're going to die of lung cancer. Like, don't smoke. And then I hear this commercial, I'm glad they don't play it anymore, like little Johnny says, Daddy, I love you so much, stop smoking. And the dad's like, okay, I will. And my kids were saying, obviously your parents didn't love you as much as that kid because they didn't stop smoking. But anyway, in terms of memorializations, we know certain things aren't that good to do, planting trees at school. For all I know, you guys do all the planting of the trees. I'm not saying to rip out the trees. From at this point on, though, there's certain things that when kids come to school, you don't want to be reminded constantly when you're in school. And that's really important. We want to remember people, and we don't want to just remember, we don't want to remember how they died. We want to remember how they lived. And we want to remember who they were and what they stood for. And I say to kids all the time, tell me about that teacher. We were at a school recently in New Jersey where the teacher, very similar, sounds like your teacher, was very beloved. Was also an advisor to the students. And the students said, it was an all-girls school. They're like, we told him everything, like all our problems, and he was there and he listened to all of them. And I wish, one girl said, he had told us his problems. Like, we could have helped him. And I'm like, you know, it's not one thing though. Sometimes people hear someone lost a job. Lots of people lose their job, or they break up, or they get in trouble with, you know, an undercover cop, for instance, whatever. But lots of people have lots of things happen, and it's not just that. Maybe that's the last straw, but there was already things going on. So that's important too. I want to just say that because it's really important that kids know, because kids hear, or we hear, oh, this thing happened and then that happened. No, there's other things going on. It's very complicated, and that's what makes it so difficult. So a couple more things. When we go to pick up our pieces, and depending on the loss, depending how many losses we've had in our life, how many things have happened. One guy, Robert Macy from Boston, I love him, a traumatologist, will say, he doesn't say to people, what's wrong with you? He'll say, what happened to you? And think about that. So often we're like, what's wrong with that kid who can't sit still in school? Some of you teachers are like, this kid, it's like, you have no idea. You know, there's a story I read sometimes when I do staff trainings about, it's on the internet, called The Perfume, about a little boy, and he's, you know, the teacher doesn't like having him in class, and it turns out his mom died a couple years earlier, but he didn't know that. And he used to be a great student, but now he lives with his dad, and his dad's not involved in his life, and so kids act out sometimes. So kids who grieve and teens, if they can't talk about it, it comes out in their body. So when I talk to teens a lot about how they're feeling, I don't say, how are you feeling? I say, where are you feeling it? When you first heard, where'd you feel it? Or where are you feeling now? And they'll say, my chest is really tight. I have headaches a lot, stomach aches, and especially if they're not able to get it out in other ways. And that's why we want to talk about different ways to get it out and different ways that you can share, that you do. How many of you work out for your head more than anything? All my kids, I run, that's my drug of choice. Since I'm 16, that's how I survive my family, really. Run half marathons with my kids. They beat me, but I run with them or run behind them or whatever. But I love running. And I love that they all run, because I say, you know what, you just need sneakers. And at any point, your family makes you crazy or something's going on, and my daughter called me and said, I'm not going to stress about this. The worst comes to worst, I lose my license. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to stress about that. But she said, but I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to put in perspective, because problem solving. We need our kids to, you know, and some of us that have been, you know, a little helicopter-ish, because maybe people weren't like that for us. I'm always trying to defend us parents that are, you know, we're all over them when they're little. And then we're like, bye-bye, have a good 4 years, don't drink too much. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, we're like constantly around them. So you want to help them problem solve. You want to ask them. So don't be so quick to jump in with what we should do. I tell teachers all the time in classes, I'm working with a school where a 5-year-old died, and the teacher said, what do we do with his desk? I said, ask the kids. Don't say right away, whatever you pick, we're going to do. Give me some ideas. And the one class said, we want to use it as a library corner in the back, because she loved books. And we're going to bring in her favorite books. And they all agreed that was okay, and that's what they did. And then at the winter break, they said, okay, we're going to do that for a few weeks, and then at winter break, the custodian's going to take the desk. He needs it for another class. But they did that for a short time. And I love asking kids. Sometimes we have so many things on our mind. Ask your kids. One dad I'm working with, his son died, and he just asked his other son, who lied to him about something, I need to punish you, son. He's 7. What should I do? And the boy's like, take away my iPhone for a month, no television for a month. The father's like, okay, I was talking about like dessert tonight or something, not like, but kids will give you some ideas. Say to them, like, how can I respect you with your, you know, this is a really hard losses we've had. What would you like from me? How can I be a really good parent for you now? Because this is really hard. We've never gone through this before, perhaps. How could I help you? Because I'm worried, you know, I want to make sure that you know that you can come to me. Who else do you go to talk to? You know, do you have people that you talk to? I always give people this hotline, and now it's going national. It's the 2nd floor. There's teen lines, but this is, it's messed up, but because I bring it everywhere. 2nd floor, and it's 3/8, a bunch of 2s and ends in an 8. And kids for 10 to 24-year-olds call, and it's all trained counselors that answer the phone. They volunteer their time, and it's great. I know a lot of counselor friends of mine have called just to check. It's great. It's now, there's an app on the iPhone. I have it on my iPhone. You can text for help. So it's 2nd floor with a 2ndfloor.org. It's awesome. And I was at a Chipotle recently. Well, not recently, because of, but anyway, a while ago. And a 15-year-old said to me, I just want you to know you came to my health class a couple years ago, and you talked about all that grief stuff, and I like the Play-Doh. I always give them Play-Doh when I talk to them. And they're like, can I keep this? I'm like, yeah, this little ball of Play-Doh, and they're so excited. And he said, you gave that hotline to us? And I turned my life around 180 degrees. I was ready. And you gave me the hotline number. And I left, and my 16-year-old's like, wow, you actually help people. I'm like, no, I gave him a resource. And I really believe we give someone a resource if we listen. So that's the other thing, and I know I don't have, I have a little bit more time. Resources, listening and giving resources to people. I am like a walking resource. Like you name, I could play a game one day. You just yell out a loss, a challenge, and I'll be like, okay, here's a book, a website. I love doing that because I want you to know that you are not alone. And this is one of the races. I run in races that have shirts that are meaningful, but this is Contact We Care, a suicide hotline. And you are not alone. Those 3 words, just like I need help, are huge, right? When kids are little, they have no problem saying I need help. When I go to elementary schools, I'll say, everybody together say I need help, and they'll all chant it, and I'm like, I love that. Because every time you have a birthday, it's gonna be harder to say, and they say, why? I'm like, I don't know. And if you join the military, it's really hard. And if you're a professional and you help people, it's really hard. And God forbid you're a therapist or something and you need help. I don't know why, but we need to say need help. You know, they have those car things that say send help. I feel like we could walk around sometimes like this. Sometimes like when I give blood and they say be kind to me, I gave blood. I want to walk around, not with a victim shirt. I'm not into being a victim. I have aunts who are like you're either, you know, a survivor or a victim. I don't want to be a victim, but I want people to be nice. That's why my license plate says be kinder. It was supposed to say be kind, but that was taken. In New Jersey, it's so shocking to me that someone has a plate that says be kind. So I'm going to find that plate and park next to them with my be kinder and that I love my kids whether or not they're honor students, which I had on my car a long time. So my kids said, we sound like morons, Mom. We really do. I'm like, I love it. Trucks let me merge. They're like pulling over saying, I love that. You love your kids whether or not they're honor students. I'm like, yeah, because the non-honor students are going to be the ones flying me on cruises one day because they're super creative. Malcolm Gladwell, if you haven't read David and Goliath, love Malcolm Gladwell. How many of you have read David and Goliath or skimmed through it? You should all read the whole chapter on Harvard and the University of Maryland about some scientist he followed who, because at Harvard she was the bottom of her class, she changed her major, whereas if she had gone to where she wanted to go, University of Maryland, she'd be a scientist. But also he's got a whole chapter on kids with dyslexia that grow up, and like Charles Schwab, who's dyslexic, so many people, it's all about underdogs and people that struggle, people that lose a parent at a young age. So that's the other part. I want people to know that we come through really hard things. And like Fred Rogers, look for the helpers, there's always helpers. We come through amazing things. The people sitting next to you, you have no idea. You may know them, but I promise they have stories and things they've gone through that if they told you, as Longfellow said, if we could read the secret diaries, the secret histories of our enemies, there'd be enough understanding to disarm all hostility. And I minced his words and he's like, oh, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. But anyway, his point is, you know, Abe Lincoln said, I don't like that man. I have to get to know him more. Cranky people are hurting people. You know, some of you are like, really? Is that their problem? It's like, no, really, some of the crankiest, coldest people. Some of those teachers that aren't warm and supportive. When I had a boy, his mom was murdered, and the 11th grade teacher at a private school was going to give him an F because he couldn't memorize a long poem a week after his mother was murdered. And I said, wow. And I said, this boy's crying, saying, my mom died. All I want to do, like a lot of kids say, dedicate this schooling and college to my mom. I want to be something for my mom. I want to really, and I said, I bet when this woman, whatever it was, went through something tough, no one was there for her. And you know what? And we got the guidance counselor involved, and the teacher finally gave in and let him do a different project. We explained that when people are grieving, you can't remember. And remember that with your kids. It's hard to focus in schoolwork. They need a lot more breaks in their homework. They may feel like, what's the point of doing any of it? Don't we feel like that sometimes? Especially when young people die, people in their 20s and younger, and we're like, what's the point of anything? If that can happen, and then spiritually on all levels, their kids, you know, we like to live with feeling like we have meaning in our life. We like to live feeling like we have safety, that we make these assumptions that I'm safe and the world is, and then all of a sudden something like this happens and it rocks our world. And for kids, and they can't even articulate some of it. For us, we've lived through a lot, we've seen things, we've read books, we know, our kids need that. So share with them. some of the ways you've gone through things. Say to them, how did you get through the last really hard thing? I say that a lot to people. I don't have them bring the whole thing up, but I say, I know you've probably gone through some other tough things in your life. What got you through them? You know, we're always asking people what their problems are, and our problems change day to day, year to year. Some of them don't, but most of them do. If I were to say, when my mother got diagnosed with lung cancer, she said, as soon as the doctor said cancer, she didn't remember anything else. And she said, I just remember thinking, I want all my problems back that I had 10 minutes ago, that I don't remember what they were, but they seem so big, and now they don't. And now I lost my train of thought. I was trying to hold on to it, but anyway. So when these things happen and they're big, we need to make space in our hearts. Mindfulness, my best friend practices a lot of meditation and mindfulness, and grieving people sometimes say to me, I don't want to sit still. Because when I sit still, I want to just cry. It all hits me. And some of us stay really busy for years because we don't have time to grieve. I used to work in an inpatient psychiatric unit, one of my favorite jobs in the world besides what I do now. And I loved it because when people came in after suicide attempts, after struggling with bipolar, addiction, you name it, it didn't matter how many letters were next to their name, where they lived. None of that mattered. If they were homeless, it just mattered. They sat in a circle and they were all overwhelmed. And I felt honored to be with them, and I felt so honored. And I love that I work there because I get to tell high school kids, if they ever have been or wind up there or a loved one, it's not for crazy people. It's for people that are feeling so overwhelmed. And sometimes we really are like, I don't know what to do. And I don't feel safe, and I need to get people there. And these people would share, and I finally said, everyone here has grief on some level. Lost a job, a person, our sense of identity, safety. We've lost, our financial dreams and hopes, all sorts of things. And I'd say to them, I used to think this, that it was like the big Super Bowl of life. And we all get called in. And the big coach is saying, so how's it going out there? And we're like, yeah, no, it's not going well. We don't have any plays. Okay, so we're all here together. Let's get a playbook. Let's come up with some new ideas. And that's what happens to us sometimes. And I think that taking the shame away, the stigma of not just certain deaths, but just struggling. Whether kids have learning difficulties or differences, whatever the correct term is, it's okay. Imagine if kids could say, yeah, I had this. I mean, I go to some schools and kids will be like, I have Asperger's, I have this, I have that. I'm like, hey, you have that. You're not that. Because that's important. Say to one woman, you're not a schizophrenic. You have schizophrenia. But so does that woman on the TED Talk, that wonderful, amazing woman from England, hearing voices. What's her name? That's amazing. I tell you, I have kids say, just watch TED Talks. My son, who's 22, the teachers used to call and say, he's lazy. And I'd say, don't use that word ever about anybody ever in your whole life. I hate that word. Because my son's not lazy, he just doesn't like your class. The teachers didn't like me very much. They'd say he won't do his homework. I'm like, I don't blame him. He's in school 6 hours. I used to homeschool my kids in middle school. I'd say, come on, let's face it, if you could skip 1 year of middle school, how much more self-esteem would we all have, right? Like 7th grade where everybody's writing notes and on Instagram, like whatever. So now he's like studying Mandarin and he's going to China and does all these crazy things that I don't want to know about some of the things he does, but he's awesome, and I forgot why I started talking about him. Lazy, thank you, lazy. So our judgment, though, sometimes about people are mean, people are cold, get to know them. Don't be so quick. The next time someone says, hey, you know what I heard? Say, I don't want to hear it. Because we have to stop the gossip chain if we want our kids to stop doing it. We have to do it. And let's face it, we can say, I'm not going to gossip, and the next time you're at the coffee shop and someone starts saying something, how hard is it to not jump on that? It's like the food in the back. It's like it's there, oh, I just want to get my 2 cents, and maybe it was that. And instead say, you know what? There's so many other things we could be talking about right now. Let's talk about something. I was talking about TED Talks. Like, he'll say to me, I watch TED Talks, I listen to podcasts. Teach your kids to get inspired. Do you have a nursing home around here? Do you have places with people that have gray hair and old? Some of you are like, really? Wait a minute. And I say, these people have amazing stories. And some of them, their family lives far away and they don't get to visit them. They would love you to visit them. I want community centers where we match up older people with younger people. We do that in Livingston, New Jersey. They have a listening club where grandparents that are retired go into the middle school, shoot hoops with the kids, play, and the kids tell them. This one man said, you would not believe the stuff kids tell me. And I'm like, I do, because I give them an index card and say, share with me anonymously. And then sometimes I cry when I read the cards. You know what makes me cry? And sometimes I'll read them out loud. I'll say to the kids, is it okay if I read them in the class out loud? No names. And some kids, whether they're on the spectrum or they give too much information, I'll edit it so you don't really know. But I'll say to them, if you don't want me to read it, just write do not read. And sometimes the kids write, and this is the one that always makes me cry, tear up. I'm never going to live up to my parents' expectations, and I'm always going to be a disappointment to them. And I'll say, I'm sorry my voice is cracking, because if your parents knew how you felt, and we've had guidance counselors talk to some of the kids and called parent meetings, your kids are so stressed out, and most of them really, really want to make you happy, and some of them are going through so much difficulty in different areas of their life, and they don't know how to come to you and tell you. And we're saying, like, how'd the team go? How's this going? How's the SAT book? And they're like, oh my gosh. And I say to kids, if you could do something with your parents, like we would just go to the beach and not talk about anything like that. You know, my father was always asking us, what are you doing? Did you write the book? My last conversation with the man, he's in the hospital, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, don't ask me what I'm doing. Ask me how I am. I don't always want to be about doing. We're like human doings. Don't you feel like that? Like we never sit and just show up and the kids say, are you sick? Why are you sitting down? Like imagine the snow day. Did you guys have a blizzard day? Did you have no school? Saturday. We had no school Monday, and I'm like, this is awesome, let's go sledding. The fact that we're trapped in our house, although I have to say, of course, because of the work I do, I was immediately thinking of all the people with domestic violence and all the people that are living with someone with addiction or the addicts and alcoholics that couldn't get to a meeting, although there's a lot of online support. I was thinking about not everybody wants to be trapped in their house. I'm like, when my kids are trapped in the house, they're like, oh no, she wants to talk to us. I'm like, this is awesome. It's like going on motorhome trips. We're trapped in a room. They're like, Mom, this is your dream. I'm like, it is that we're all together and we're gonna like hang out. And they're like, yeah, that's not our dream. So anyway, I want to wind up with a couple more things as I look at my time. And you're like, stop talking. Okay, I'm gonna wind up in a minute. Please, go home, look at your kids tonight, if they're there. You know, if they're home, and next time you see them or have a chance to see them. And look them in the eyes. And just say, wow. And they'll say, are you okay? Did you just come from the doctor? No. I really appreciate you. And I've been going, we're so busy in our lives. We haven't even gotten time to like hang. I don't mean talk about, just hang out together. Like chill out a little bit. Not talking about what we're doing. Like is there a show you want me to see that you love? A song you'd love? You want to teach me to play that cool song on the guitar? That's a great thing. If you fight with your teens a lot, let them teach you how to do something. It's a great assignment. Once a week for an hour, let them be the teacher. Get blown away by what an awesome teacher your child might be. You know, go home and say, I haven't told you how much I really appreciate what a great brother you are. I really appreciate you, not even for what you do, just for who you are. And I can't wait to see who you're becoming. Like I say to my kids all the time as I write to them on Facebook, because that's the politically correct thing, like not, they're like, Mom, on Instagram, like whatever. And I write, and I'll just say, I love who you are. I love watching you unfold. And I also know, I don't know if they're going to be here tomorrow. I really don't. I have a son who doesn't talk that much. You know, boys, sometimes they don't talk. Like I used to say, how do you know if they're depressed or they're just a boy? When the Columbine, seriously, when everyone's like, they didn't know he was building a bomb, like, I don't think I would know if my kid was building a bomb. So after that, I go in his room, sometimes look under the bed. I'm like, not even sure what I'm looking for, but I don't want to be one of those mothers that they all say she didn't know. But our kids are really private. How many of, and there's a whole nother talk, but even with the drug addiction, the heroin, you know, we don't know. We're thinking, oh, we know what it looks like when they're an addict. No, we don't. Because some of the people in the room are functioning and our kids are functioning and they're struggling. So I want my kids to know if drinking, drugging, whatever it is, sometimes we wake up and go, wow, the eating disorder. Just going in the bathroom here and the eating disorder. I had an eating disorder in college. Just seeing that sign by the bathroom, I have mixed feelings about it being by the bathroom, only because there's a whole thing about how many people die from bulimia, and I'm thinking, wow, it's good to know, but sometimes if we scare people, they don't go for help. It's good to have phone numbers too, and there is information about that. But so there's a lot of things our kids are struggling with, self-injury, and we want to know, like when they come to us, you got to practice your not freaked out face. When they tell you stuff and you go, huh. Sometimes my kids will be like, really, Mom, that's your, I'm like, I'm exploding in my head and I'm just buying a little time now. Like, I don't even know what to say. You know, because we get scared. And then you make a phone call to one of those people on your hand. And you say, you know what? I didn't get the manual on parenting when this happens. That section must have, you know, got lost in the mail. I need some help. And I'm always telling parents to go to support groups. Go, find support groups. Call people up and ask people. Suicide survivor groups, parents who've lost children, moms who have kids with bipolar, people who have all kinds of conduct disorder. Because unless you've been there, you have no idea what that's like for people. So don't judge. Go home and look at those people. And if you're going home with someone, before you get in start the car with them, look at them and say, you know, I haven't told you how much I appreciate you. And listen to them. And the next time someone talks to you, don't jump in to talk. Do that like Harville Hendricks imago therapy, where you listen. And then you say, let me see if I got this. Are you saying, and they'll be like, wow, yeah. And then you say, is there more? Do you want to tell me more? Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing that with me. And you don't have to have the words of wisdom, just listen. And the next time you see someone who looks sad or whatever, and you could just say, I'm here. If you want to talk, I tell kids, if you see someone in school hiding their tears, you don't have to go up to them and say, you look like you're hiding your tears. You could say, do you want to sit with me or do you want some time alone? Ask people. So my last two things, ask people what they need and let people know what you need. Don't be so quick to get people out of your life and say they didn't say the right thing, they didn't. Let them know. Say, you know, when you said that, that's not a helpful thing to say, and I know you meant well, but that really wasn't helpful. And then go back and go, I'm really sorry. I didn't know what to say. I felt embarrassed. I hadn't talked to you since it happened. I didn't know. Send the cards now. People don't want everyone in their living room the first hour. They love the people who 2 months later write a note thinking of you. I just want you to know it's this time of year, whatever. So it's never too late. It's never too late. No matter what's going on in anyone's life, it's not the end of the world. It's never too late. And connection heals. So I've used up all our time, but I want to now say, as you're all ready to fall asleep, go to sleep or go home and do some healthy coping skills. Go home and write in a journal. And that's another thing I don't want to not say. Writing is so powerful, we know, for trauma, for having our kids just write, and I say rip it up, shred it, and I say to them, if you live with a parent that reads your journals, write some really juicy stuff in it, and then they'll be like, wow, you know, there's a book like Jonathan Tropper's book like that. But anyway, writing, exercise is the #1 antidepressant and anti-anxiety. And kids who self-injure, talking to somebody 3 times a week, 20 minutes, doesn't have to be a therapist, and running, they're finding, Barrett Walsh, who's the expert on self-injury, those are the 2 things. So helping our kids together, go home and say, we got to get some better coping skills in this family. We got to start going fishing or go to the beach. We have to start chilling out a little bit. We're like way too stressed. And they'll be like, wait, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And say, no, I want to enjoy each other more. Because they're going to be gone soon. They're really going to be gone. Don't you want them to visit? That's what I'm banking on, that they're going to visit sometimes. Not too much, but sometimes. So anyway, I have cards up here. My website's Grief Speaks. Feel free. I love to answer questions, but I have to say, I'm going out of the country Saturday. I've never gone out of the country. I'm going to the Dominican Republic on Saturday with my girlfriend to Samana, which sounds like, I don't know. Anybody been there? It sounds like really a nice place, and it'll be good. And I don't think I'm going to have Wi-Fi, but if you email me, as soon as I get back on Thursday, I will respond. People can call me, email me. I have people on the phone with me all the time, and I love talking to people and giving you resources or listening or whatever. And I'd love to come back someday down the road, talk to your kids. I'd love to do something for the school, for the staff, if you'd like. So thanks, and I know I cut into the question and answer, so whoever wants to do that, feel free. Thank you so much. And I just want to say again, just thanks for coming out, because you guys make all the difference, and I really appreciate you just coming out and being here. And say something to someone you haven't maybe seen or met, or hug somebody. That's what it's all about. So thanks.